السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته والصلاة والسلام على رسوله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Welcome to our Ramadan Revival series with ISGH. My name is Safia Ravid. I am the Female Religious Director at Maryam Islamic Center. And today we're going to talk about some women-specific concerns, circumstances, and hopefully we'll gather some answers and some perhaps tips from the fiqh perspective and also just from lived experience perspective. So my background is in Islamic fiqh and usul al-fiqh, so Islamic law and jurisprudence from the International Islamic University of Malaysia. And so I am going to jump into some women-specific fiqh. So when it comes to fasting fiqh in Ramadan, pretty much all the rules that we know generally apply to men and women. So when you fast from sun up to sundown, intentions of fast, etc., they're pretty much the same. However, there's going to be some women-specific fasts, specifically when it comes to menstruation, and then pregnancy and breastfeeding. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about today, inshallah. And also at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how as women, we might be able to maximize our time in Ramadan if we've got other responsibilities, like we may be mothers taking care of newborns or even toddlers or even grown children, or even, maybe newlyweds or whatever it may be, the circumstance may be in your life where you have some added responsibilities. What can we do to maximize our time and efforts? Okay, so we're going to start with for a woman who is menstruating. Of course, when menstruation starts, or if postpartum bleeding begins, which is called nifas, then as soon as that starts, then a woman cannot pray. So she is, for example, she's been fasting all day in Ramadan, and at 6 p.m. she happens to get her period. She would stop fasting that day. She would break her fast, and she would have to make up that day of fasting because it no longer counts as a fully fasted day. Of course, inshallah, she gets the reward for what she has fasted, right? Of course, everything she's done that is of good, she is rewarded for. But again, the obligation hasn't been fully fulfilled. And so she has to make up that day again. Okay. A note about making up days is for ladies and for anybody who feels like they might be in a situation where they have to make up quite a number of days. Note those down. So I have encountered many ladies who say, years ago I missed XYZ fast, I don't know the number, etc. So that's why I'm always recommending people to take out their phone, take out a notebook, take something out and just mark down the amount of days that you missed, because it's not just like a ballpark. It's like you should make up the amount that you missed. That's the amount that you want to make up. So I always recommend pick up your phone, open up a notes tab, write make up fasts, and just tally it every single day that you have to make up, whether that's due to menstruation or postpartum bleeding or anything else, sickness or traveling. Okay, so if you fast all day and your period starts, yes, you still have to make up that day if the period does start before Maghrib time. If you are near the end of your period and say Monday, it looks like it's going to be the end of your period, it's your 7th or 8th day, it's what your norm is. And but you're not entirely sure if you have finished and you are now in a state of tahara. And so you can go to sleep that night, without knowing whether or not you're going to fast, but make the intention that, what, if I am clean tomorrow, then I am going to fast. And so come in with that intention in the night. And if you happen to wake up in the morning and, suhoor is already passed, maybe even fajr is already passed, and you see that you are completely dry, completely clean, then you may fast that day. Of course, you'll make up ghusl, you'll make up that fajr prayer, but you may fast that day because it is considered a clean day, a day of purity. Okay, so it's allowed then to make that fast, even if you did not make suhoor that day, maybe even if you missed fajr that day, even if you hadn't made ghusl yet, your fast is still counts. Again, you want to try to make that intention before the night before, saying, if I am clear, then I am going to fast. Also, there's the opinion of Imam Malik that most scholars will say you need to make the niyyah before every fast the next day. And Imam Malik states that one niyyah is sufficient for the entirety of Ramadan. That before Ramadan starts, we think to ourselves, I'm going to fast the next 30 days, whichever days I am able to. And so he has mentioned that that is sufficient for the entirety of the Ramadan. And so you don't have to renew that intention every single night before you wake up. And then the other madhahib all say that no, you have to make that intention every night that I will fast tomorrow, or at least, niyyah is intention. So even if you don't state it in your head, knowing, hey, tomorrow's a fasting day, that is sufficient for niyyah. Quick note when it comes to ladies who are fasting, who are not fasting, or who are not praying during Ramadan. I know we have this, let's say it's sort of a taboo topic that we are on our period. And so sometimes we pretend to pray, or we pretend to fast, even though we are not praying or fasting. This is not something advised. And it's not to say that while everyone is in your home is fasting, you go ahead and eat in front of them and walk around with your tub of ice cream enjoying it. No, but it is said you don't have to hide this away. It's not something that you need to pretend to be doing, especially pretending to pray. This is problematic, to actually stand in the rows of the praying people and pretend that you are fasting, praying, because it's a taboo topic. We need to just start becoming more open about this in an appropriate way. Something as simple as I'm not praying, or I'm not fasting, or having it understood in your family, if you're not doing that no push you to pray or to fast. So just sort of trying to change the paradigm there, so we're not feeling this certain guilt when we're not praying or when we are not fasting and we have to pretend to be doing those things. It's not really in our sunnah. So out of respect of those fasting, yes, go ahead and eat with when other people are not around, but do not pretend to fast, and do not make lies up about praying or fasting. Do pregnant and breastfeeding women have to fast? So this is a slightly longer conversation, but when it comes to pregnancy and breastfeeding, this is where the scholars and even the Sahaba, even the Prophet ﷺ, rukhsa. A rukhsa is a concession. A concession is you come under the category of someone who can take an easier path because you have a certain circumstance. So in the Quran, Allah talks about the sick and the traveler being able to not fast, that they would not fast if they are sick or traveling. And so the pregnant woman comes under that category if she has tried to fast in the past, or her doctor has told her that she should not fast, right? So for example, a woman in her first trimester oftentimes is very sick, and to ask her to fast would be like putting a nauseous woman who is vomiting into an even more difficult situation. And so a woman can decide alongside her doctor and alongside her husband and her family to make a decision of what's best for her. If she fears for herself that she will become ill, faint, or she'll be extremely exhausted, overexhausted more than the normal person, then she doesn't have to fast. She can take the rukhsa. The same for the breastfeeding woman. If she fears for her child, or that she's going to lose all of her milk supply if she does not fast, then she may take the rukhsa, take the concession, and not fast those days of Ramadan. But of course, she would make them up later. That's the general consensus. She would make those days up that she did not fast because of pregnancy or breastfeeding later. Now, what about the case of the woman who she did not fast last Ramadan all 30 days and then she was pregnant her pregnancy continued for about 5 more months after Ramadan. She gave birth and then she started breastfeeding for the next 6 months. You see, she's in a space where 5 months of pregnancy, 6 months of breastfeeding, she actually perhaps didn't find an opportunity to even make up any of those fasts. So in that case, the scholars have said that she is given a different type of rukhsa, or there's multiple opinions from the scholars. But some scholars, such as Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu and Abdullah ibn Umar, who these are actually Sahaba at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they said that the woman who is in that state of pregnancy and nursing, she doesn't have to make up those tasks to pay the fidya. So what is the fidya? Fidya is a amount of money that is given to make up for a fast for those who are unable to make up their fasts. Okay, so the example would be like a very old person, an elderly man or woman who is at a stage in their life where they cannot fast anymore. Even if they missed all 30 last year, in the next 11 months, they are still too ill to make up those 30 in the next 11 months. Or someone who has a chronic condition, right? And so in those cases, they just don't have the opportunity to make up the fast. Therefore, they are given a different type of concession, which is you don't have to make up the fasts in these 11 months, just pay the fidya. Fidya means for every fast day missed, you have to feed one poor person their full meal. The amount in the US that is considered fidya is about $10. And of course, it can differ from country to country, but it's understood that to get a person's full like rice and meat for that day, what would constitute a full day's meal would be about $10 to $12 in the US. And so if a person who's chronically ill or is elderly and has that kind of chronic illness where they cannot make up those fasts, they just pay the fidya. So back to the pregnant and the breastfeeding. If she comes under a category of people who, from one Ramadan to the next, there was pregnancy and breastfeeding and she couldn't make it up, she comes under the category of sort of that chronically ill person in that she wasn't able to make it up, so she just has to pay the fidya. Again, this is a minority opinion from Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas. The majority opinion is that she still has to make them up sometime in her life, right? So what that means is, say she missed all 30 last year and the next 30 the next year and the next 30 of Ramadan the next year, and maybe 3 years in a row because she had maybe 3 children back to back. In that case, they say those 90 days, she just needs to make them up at some point in her life. That Allah is merciful. You can't expect someone to make up 90 fasts in 1 year. That's fasting almost 1/3 of the year. And so it is mentioned that she just makes the intention that throughout the rest of her life, she will try to make up all of those fasts. So that is one opinion, pays the fidya only. And then she pays the fidya and makes them up, but that is that's doubling up on what making up for a fast. And so, the two majority opinions that I've seen are from the scholars is, again, that she makes them up at some point in her life, or she just pays the fidya for those days. Okay, so that's all about making up fasts. What about what a woman can or cannot do on her period or during postpartum bleeding when it comes to ibadah during Ramadan? So reciting the Quran. I'm going to mention both opinions and going to look at the evidences behind them. So reciting the Quran, there is the opinion that a woman cannot, the Quran, meaning from her voice, orally recite the Quran, some ayat that she memorized, etc. But they're saying to actually just read the Quran and recite it, what she does not, this is not allowed. And the reason they say this, again, I'm mentioning one opinion, is that is that there's a hadith that says that the menstruating woman and the person in the state of janaba should not recite anything of the Quran. State of janaba means sexual impurity. So after a husband and wife have had intercourse or something of that nature. So these two categories are put into one hadith, that both of these do not recite from the Quran. So the rebuttal to this, the opposing opinion, is that she can read and recite the Quran, and this opinion is held by Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, rahimahumullah, Imam Malik. It's mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, and it is one opinion of Imam Shafi'i and other scholars. So there are many scholars on both sides of the issue. However, their argument is that the hadith used in the previous opinion is actually da'if, and it is considered da'if, weak, by many scholars of hadith, and therefore used to make a fiqhi ruling. A legal ruling can't be based off of a weak hadith. And so they said that because that hadith is da'if, then a woman who is in a state of menses or nifas, postpartum bleeding, she may read orally from the Quran whatever she likes, because the hadith is da'if. They continue the argument by saying that the junub, the one who's in sexual impurity, and the woman who is in her menses, they are not similar, because one is essentially voluntary sexual impurity, and is involuntary, which is menstruating. Right. And so those who said that, oh, they're pretty much the same, that's why they get the same ruling, even if this is a da'if hadith, the rationale of the second group is, no, they're really not similar. They are really not similar. Sexual impurity and menses are really not analogous to one another. And so without any sufficient evidence that is authentic, we can't just use analogy here, because it has been narrated in authentic hadith that the one in sexual impurity or a state of janaba would not recite from the Quran, right? That is a strong, the menses, it's not a strong opinion. And so to just use analogy there or qiyas is not, it's not applicable here, not from the fiqh perspective, when the two are not really analogous to one another. And then they also mentioned that, the scholars also mentioned that the women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they were normal women, human beings, which means that every month they were on their period. Every month they had their menses. And why is there not one authentic hadith to mention that they should not recite the Quran in this time? It would have been a normal occurrence that people would always ask this and he would always answer this. And in fact, there's only a da'if hadith on it, and that is not sufficient to say a woman cannot read or recite. Again, we're talking about orally. Let's jump to touching the Quran. So when it comes to touching the Quran, there's a majority opinion that only the ones who have wudu or who are purified can touch the Quran. That's the majority opinion, and it comes from Surah Waqi'ah, ayah 79, in which Allah says, "None shall touch it except the purified ones." And so the majority of scholars say, well, across the board, nobody should touch the mushaf, the actual mushaf, the physical Quran with just the Arabic in it. They should not touch it unless they are in a state of wudu. And in order to be in a state of wudu, you cannot be menstruating, meaning a menstruating woman cannot be in a state of wudu. Neither can the person who is in a state of janaba, of course, a state of sexual impurity. So they say it's impossible for a woman to touch the Quran. There is a minority opinion that this idea of none shall touch it except for the pure is mentioning touching the Lawhul Mahfuz, which is the preserved tablet up in the heavens. And so that is a minority opinion, but the majority opinion is that no, this is for human beings, and everyone who wants to touch the Quran should be in a state of wudu. So then if we take that majority opinion, how can a woman then read the Quran? If she's allowed to read and recite, but she's not allowed to touch, what can she do? So it is mentioned that she can use a barrier, like holding the Quran with a glove or moving the pages with a pen. It's also meant she can read it off of a tablet or her phone, because the phone and the tablet, the iPad, is not considered the Mus'haf. It in and of itself is a device on which the Mus'haf can be, but also lots of other things can be. So since it's not considered, since our tablet and phone are not considered the actual Mus'haf, then a woman can hold those and she can, go through those actual Mus'haf. And then it is also mentioned that if it's a book of then this is completely permissible for her to touch, because again, this is not the Mus'haf. If it's a book with tafsir of the Quran, even if it's got Quranic ayat, or a book of translation, even if it's got Quranic ayat, this is no longer considered the actual Quran Mus'haf itself. This is called a book of tafsir or a book of translation, and it is permissible for a person without wudu to touch these. Okay, and then inshallah, we will just have a few minutes before iftar here in Houston. We'll just conclude with an advice for ladies who are finding it tough based on whatever circumstance they are in life. Like I said, maybe a mom of a newborn or newly married, or whatever it may be. Maybe you just got a lot of work or homeschool or exams are coming up. So this is advice for anybody. But the advice is we are trying to be super, we're trying to be super this Ramadan. And that's one of the beauties, is that we have less distractions, meaning we don't have to eat breakfast, lunch, and we don't have to prepare those foods typically for ourselves. And so we have more time to do other things. But it may happen that we have, whatever the circumstance, motherhood or work or school or being a wife, all of these extra responsibilities are added to our plate. Just know that even a mundane task can become a form of ibadah. Even a mundane task can become a form of ibadah, and which we call mubah, something just general, permissible, doesn't get us reward or not, like driving our car or changing a diaper, work. What can change that is our niyyah. So the next time you're going about your day and you feel like, I don't have the ability to practice and do as much ibadah as I had in the past, all of these circumstances are stopping me from it, try to change your niyyah in terms of the mundane mubah tasks that you are doing. For example, I am changing this diaper so that I have a healthy child, so that this child, grows up and is a good believer of Allah, right? A good worship. And so yes, it's a long-term, it is a long-term niyyah, but this niyyah can gain reward for that mundane task. I am doing this work to be a better student so that I can graduate and I'm able to make money and support amazing Islamic causes. All of this is ibadah. It can be ibadah if we change our intention. So yes, we are on super drive. We do the best that we can this month. But if you're finding yourself, stuck between a rock and a hard place, and there's just no ability, no wiggle room in your schedule to be able to do those extra works of ibadah that you used to be able to do, change your niyyah for these mundane tasks, and inshallah, Allah will reward you with mountains of good that you don't even realize you would have had on the Day of Judgment, just because you made these mundane tasks into some form of ibadah with a change of niyyah. With that, inshallah, I will conclude. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم وجزاكم الله خيرا. And inshallah, we're going to have Ustad Abdurrahman moments.
Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, there's going to be a few minutes left to Adhan. Adhan is going to be at 7:53, 7:51 right now. Inshallah, I'll be reading some Rabbana du'as from the Quran, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. ربنا إننا نخاف أن يفرط علينا أو أن يطغى. ربنا آمنا فاغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين. ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين وجعلنا للمتقين إماما. ربنا لغفور شكور. ربنا وسعت كل شيء رحمة وعلما فاغفر للذين تابوا واتبعوا سبيلك وقهم عذاب الجحيم. ربنا وأدخلهم جنات عدن التي وعدتهم ومن صلح من آبائهم وأزواجهم وذرياتهم إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. جزاك الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.